So after 9 to 10 years with Canon, it's time to say goodbye. It's been a run. It's been a really good run, but unfortunately, as time progresses and my needs change, and unfortunately Canon stays behind, I've now upgraded to the Sony ZV-1, and I'm now a Sony shooter. So in today's video, I'm gonna run you through exactly why I switched from Canon to Sony, and before we get into this is not endorsed, sponsored, or I don't even have a contact at Sony, nor do I have a contact at Canon. Obviously, this wouldn't be a sponsored Canon video, but either way, it's not a sponsored or endorsed video whatsoever. It's purely a personal choice. So to understand how I got here, we're gonna take it all the way back. Canon is really, really good for beginners and still is really, really good for beginners. I started my photography journey off with the Canon 600D, and photography back then was my main and pretty much only focus, which was perfect. The 600D to this day, still takes fairly good photos. Of course, it's not a full frame camera, the autofocus isn't really speedy, and the ISO performance is bleak to say best, but it still takes good photos. You light your subject well, you make sure that it's easy enough for the camera to find the focus, and you're cooking with gas. So after the 600D, I moved my way up and up and up and up, all the way to the Canon 5D Mark IV. This was an upgrade to say the least. I loved and still love this camera. The photos that come out of this camera are stunning, and it wasn't only photography that I shot on this camera. This is when I started to find my love for video. I actually daily vlogged for a whole month and uploaded it to this channel, but they're all hidden now because, goodness me, not super proud of them. It's fun to go look back on, but it's not for the public eye anymore. I also shot a load of client stuff with this camera, and most important of all, it was actually the camera that got me started on social media. Of course, I didn't start with this camera on social media, but it was the camera that I saw a large amount of growth with, and the camera that really started to get the ball rolling. So the 5D4 was great. I love this camera, but goodness me, it was not great at video. Sure, you could shoot 4K, but it was in motion JPEG, the file sizes were massive, and it was like a 1.5 times crop. Not ideal. But then something changed. A few years go by, and the R5 and the R6 get announced and released. Okay, I'm sold. I go ahead and pick myself up the R6, I sell all my EF glass, I buy the 24-70 f2.8, the 70-200 f4, and the 16mm f2.8, which was great, good little pancake lens for vlogging. And for the next 9 months after that, I'm loving the R6. This is the camera for me. And just a quick little interruption today. If you are enjoying today's video and you like this kind of content, I would highly recommend to go and sign up to my weekly newsletter. I've been pumping out weekly newsletters for now over 2 months, and I absolutely love it, and so do a load of other people, which is a really, really nice feeling. I talk a lot about gear, the creative process, some really fun and interesting stories of how I got to where I am today, and I also have some exciting news about a possible new platform that could be on the way. Wink, wink. I can't wink all that well. So if this sounds like something that you could be interested in and you'd like to hear from me on a weekly basis, go and check out my weekly newsletter. The link is in the description, and I'll see you over there. But that's it. I'm leaving it at that. Let's dive back into today's video. So at this point, we've got the R6 and I've had it for about 9 months. Now, all of a sudden, my entire workflow changes. I start shooting a lot more videos like this. We're in the studio a lot more and we're filming a lot longer. It's not just little 5 to 6 second little clips that I'm shooting at sunrise and sunset anymore. All of a sudden, things are getting a lot more serious. And this is where I encountered my first issue with the R6, the overheating and the 30-minute record time limit. I never experienced any issues with the 30-minute record time limit. I don't shoot weddings, I don't shoot events, podcasts, and I didn't even shoot videos like this for a long time, but all of a sudden I needed to shoot for longer than 30 minutes. So this wasn't for me, but to be completely transparent, it wasn't even the 30-minute record time that was the issue. It was actually the overheating. I couldn't even get this to 30 minutes. I'm gonna put a few little clips on screen now of this camera overheating, but this camera overheats at about 25 minutes of shooting 4K 30 FPS, which is not ideal. And see, the thing is, once the camera's overheated, you can't just turn it off and turn it back on again or put it in the fridge for 2 minutes. No, it needs time to cool down, and all of a sudden, all of your progress comes to a stop, and you've just gotta wait for this little guy to calm down and cool off. And see, the thing is, the video still looks great and always has looked great out of this camera. And so do the photos, even though it's only got a 20 megapixel sensor. But slowly but surely, this was the camera that wasn't for me. So I looked out to the market to see what else was available. and I settled on the Canon R5C. This was great. It wasn't overheating because it had a fan on the back of it, and it didn't have a record time, so sick, no bueno, we picked it up. Now the photos out of the R5C, absolutely stunning. The footage, flawless, but I didn't understand what I was getting myself into. Now, I really feel like Canon does not focus on the creator when it comes to cameras that they make. Right now, while this camera wasn't overheating, we didn't have a record limit, and the footage looked great, the battery life and autofocus in video sucks. I was getting consistently bad autofocus regardless of what settings I used. The tracking was below average to say the best. And unfortunately, the battery life was getting me about 40 to 50 minutes camera on, not recording, camera on time. So it constantly had to be plugged in to an external power source. And after spending quite a lot of money on my first cinema camera, this wasn't the experience I was expecting. Now, I shot with this camera for just over a year, and I loved the footage that came out of it, but pairing that up with the 28-70 f2, just f2, which is an incredible lens, I also ruined my back in the process. Hiking, traveling, and shooting with this camera really did my body no favors at all. So let's fast forward to November of last year, and I'm shooting in Kenya with a load of friends, and everyone's shooting on Sony, and I'm the only one shooting with Canon out there, and I'm having autofocus issues, I'm having battery life issues, I'm constantly changing the battery around. I've got this huge V-mount battery sitting on my lap as we're in a safari car. It's not ideal at all. Of course, you also can't get third-party lenses because Canon said, no one else can use the RF mount. So Sigma, Tamron, no thanks. And yeah, that's just not ideal. All of a sudden you're spending a load of cash on Canon RF mount lenses, which they're great, don't get me wrong, but goodness me, they're not affordable. So after a week of being surrounded by people shooting on Sony, I got back to Dubai and I purchased the Sony ZV-E1. I was sold. And in that week, I also sold my Canon R5C, so I could not go back on my decision, and I've loved it. This little camera is incredible. It's tiny in comparison to the R5C. I've now paired it up with the 24-70 f2.8 and the 20mm 1.8, and the 20mm 1.8's on the camera right now. Of course, the ZV-E1 is shooting this. The battery life is incredible. The footage coming out of this is insane as well. The image stabilization, great, absolutely love it. Autofocus, whew, on another level. It doesn't overheat, at least in my experience, and I've been shooting for over an hour at some points, still no problems, so that's amazing. And the best part is things are not ridiculously overpriced. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a cheap camera, but for what I do, this is my full-time job, so it makes sense to spend this kind of money on a camera. And it's leaps and bounds cheaper than the R5C. And it's wild to think that this little camera is now running circles around all my Canon gear. And don't get me wrong, it was quite a challenging time to sell all my Canon gear. The only camera I still have left is the R6 because I do need a second camera a lot of the times to be able to shoot my camera doing things or me shooting. So yeah, unfortunately I am still shooting on this, but slowly but surely, and this is the last piece of Canon gear I have paired up with the 50mm 1.8, I will be saying goodbye to Canon, and it has been a bit of a tough time. I know that sounds ridiculous, but Canon built my career. Of course, I built my career, but I built my career on Canon. And I love Canon, I really do. I love how the bodies look, I love how the footage looks, I love how it feels in the hand, but they have just stopped innovating. Sony by far is leading the charge in nearly every way possible when it comes to cameras and lenses. And I love what they're doing, I really do. Is it the most ideal, perfect camera? No, I don't think that exists. But goodness me, for what I do, it's better than Canon. Like I said, I love Canon, it's hard to say goodbye. I still have my 5D4 back home in Sydney, Australia. But for now, it's time to say goodbye. Maybe until Canon releases something crazy. But you know what? I truly think that Sony by far is making the best cameras for creators, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So anyway, guys, that is gonna wrap up today's video. It's time to say goodbye to Canon. It's been a blast. And if you've learned anything from today, hopefully it's that it doesn't really matter what brand of camera you're shooting on as long as it's right for you.